Picture this, the sound of absolute chaos. You've got roaring crowds screaming her name, arena lights exploding across the octagon. You've got commentators literally losing their minds, calling her a monster, a once-in-a-generation fighter. For years, nobody believed she could lose. Not the fans, not the media, and definitely not the elite fighters she was destroying in seconds. She was the undisputed face of women's MMA, a global icon. But then, everything changed. Those roaring crowds, they were abruptly replaced by something absolutely terrifying. Silence. One kick. Just one moment. One deafening, shocked silence that echoed around the entire world. In a fraction of a second, years of perceived invincibility were completely shattered. It was violent, it was sudden. The undisputed champion was on the floor. And just like that, the most feared woman in combat sports disappeared. She didn't just lose a fight, she vanished from the very throne she had built. The entire world was left in a state of profound shock. Which brings us to the ultimate question of this explainer. What exactly happened to her? Section 1. Forged by trauma, a childhood built by pain. To really understand the fall, we gotta look at how the weapon was forged. Born in California back in 1987, Ronda's early years were completely defined by struggle. She had severe speech problems. Doctors honestly thought she might never speak properly. Kids mocked her, she felt isolated, different, weak. But her mother, Anne Maria DeMars, she was a world champion judoka, strong, disciplined, demanding. In her house, weakness just wasn't accepted. And then came the defining tragedy. In 1995, when Ronda was only 8 years old, her father took his own life after a severe spinal injury. That kind of loss shatters a family. But inside Ronda, something hardened. Pain became fuel. Anger became motivation. She channeled that dark energy all the way to 2008, making history as the first American woman to win an Olympic bronze medal in judo. She later admitted that growing up, she fully believed the world was cruel. To Ronda, being vulnerable was dangerous. That childhood trauma formed a lifelong vow. She decided very early on that she would never, ever be helpless again. Part 2. The unstoppable force. The fighter is born. See, right after that historic Olympic win, she hit rock bottom. She was broke, literally sleeping in her car, and that is exactly where she discovered mixed martial arts. She entered the sport like a violent storm, bringing with her one specific technique, the armbar. By trapping an opponent's arm between her legs and bending it backward against the elbow joint, she created agonizing pain. Her opponents knew it was coming, they trained for it, and they still couldn't survive it. She proved UFC President Dana White wrong and became the very first female fighter signed by the promotion. 34 seconds. That is how long her opponents lasted. She wasn't just fighting them, she was breaking them mentally before the referee even signaled the start. 16 seconds. The tension in those arenas was suffocating. We're talking about destroying elite, world-class athletes. She wasn't just winning, she was humiliating people in the time it takes you to watch a television commercial. 14 seconds. Entire title fights. Over in a blink. With these unbelievable numbers, she exploded into a global phenomenon. Talk shows, movies, magazine covers. She was the first female UFC champion, and hands down the biggest star in the sport. Her aura grew so massive that people genuinely believed she was invincible. Nobody could stop her, not even close. Section 3. The weight of perfection. The price of dominance. But here's the thing. Dominance has a dark, suffocating byproduct. Pressure. On one side, you had the public myth, a global icon completely worshipped by the media. The UFC depended on her as their absolute biggest star. Millions of fans expected pure perfection every single time she stepped into the cage. But on the other side was the private reality, a crushing, isolating burden to maintain this unstoppable persona, and it was destroying her from the inside out. Section 4. The myth dies. November 15th, 2015. Melbourne, Australia. Over 50,000 screaming fans packed the stadium, expecting another quick 14-second coronation against the patient boxing champion Holly Holm. But as the fight began, something felt deeply, deeply wrong. Ronda was chasing wildly. She was missing punches. You could literally see the frustration growing by the second. For the first time in years, the monster looked human. And then came round 2. Holm's left foot smashed into Ronda's head. The invincible champion collapsed instantly. The massive arena absolutely froze. Commentators screamed in shock. Millions watching around the world could not process what they had just witnessed. The unstoppable champion was gone, just like that. The silence that followed was completely haunting, because deep down, everyone realized the exact same thing. The myth was dead. The aftermath? Brutal. The exact same media that had worshipped her suddenly turned on her. Memes flooded the internet. Critics attacked her relentlessly. And privately, she was falling apart. She experienced severe depression. She later admitted that suicidal thoughts even crossed her mind. Think about it. For years, her entire identity had been built around one single thing: winning. Now that identity lay completely shattered on the octagon canvas. But eventually, she returned for one final, desperate attempt to reclaim her throne, December 2016, against Amanda Nunes. The fight lasted less than a minute. Nunes overwhelmed her completely, crashing punch after punch through Ronda's defense until the referee had to step in and stop it. And that was it. The most dominant woman in MMA history disappeared from the UFC. There was no grand farewell speech, no dramatic goodbye to the fans, just silence. Section 5. A Complicated Legacy. Rebuilding After the Fall. After the lights of the MMA world faded, she stepped away from the constant violence. She transitioned into the WWE and focused on rebuilding herself, on becoming a mother. But people never stopped talking about her, because her true legacy is undeniable. Without her violent, terrifying reign, women's MMA might never have exploded on a global scale. She forced the doors open. She changed the UFC forever. She inspired an entire generation of fighters who walk through the doors she kicked down. Greatness is deeply complicated. Sometimes legends don't fade away slowly. Sometimes they collapse in front of the entire world. But even after the brutal defeats, even after the haunting silence, the world remembers the woman who changed fighting forever. No, she wasn't perfect, but for a moment in history, she was unstoppable. And nobody who watched it will ever forget it. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to reflect on. When you look at the pain that built her, the dominance that defined her, and the massive pressure that eventually broke her, does a sudden fall erase an unstoppable legacy?